A mislabeled VHS tape. A room locked for 4 years. A forgotten key. For author Helena Ross, the past is never truly dead. As she begins to write her final story, old ghosts return, haunting every word. She says her husband was a monster. She says she did the unforgivable. But if you lie enough times, does anyone believe your truth? Especially when that truth could destroy them all. To hear this shocking confession in its entirety, find the Ghostwriter on the Best Twists podcast, where I, Clyde, will tell you every last detail.
Chapter 67. Withville, Virginia, Wednesday, May 31st, 2023, 11:55 p.m. Alex tried to move her head to the right and was surprised when the muscles of her neck responded. Annette Packard was standing in the doorway, crouched in a shooter's stance, with both hands on a gun aimed at Jacqueline. In the confusion of the moment, the thought crossed Alex's mind that Annette looked out of place. Alex had only known her as the sophisticated and well-dressed woman who probed into politicians' lives, not as a true FBI agent trained in firearms. Perhaps this bias was what confused Alex and made her think something was off. But another moment of clarity told Alex that Annette was not in an FBI flak jacket or windbreaker. She was wearing a stylish outfit of tapered slacks, a white blouse, and high heels. And there were no other agents with her. No backup. No sirens. Just Annette and the gun she complained about having to carry at all times. "Put your hands up!" Annette yelled. "Annette," Alex said in a raspy voice that startled her. The sudden burst of adrenaline was overtaking the effects of the paralytic drug. "Alex," Annette said. "Come over here." "She can't," Jacqueline said. "Alex, come over here." Alex heard Annette enunciate each word slowly, never taking her eyes off Jacqueline as she stayed balanced in her stance. "I can't," Alex said, feeling the strength returning to her vocal cords. "She injected me with something." "Succinylcholine," Jacqueline said. "Injected into her arm. It paralyzes her muscles. Injected into her heart. It'll kill her in seconds." There was a brief standoff, where none of them moved. Alex lay in bed. Annette was frozen in her shooter's stance, and Jacqueline was like a statue, holding the full syringe in her hand like a dagger. "Drop the syringe," Annette said. Still no one moved. "Drop it or I'll shoot you." The stalemate ended when Jacqueline brought the syringe up over her shoulder, and then down in a stabbing motion toward Alex's chest. The blast of the discharging gun echoed off the walls of the motel room, and the sulfurous odor transported Alex's mind back to the night her family was killed. The night her home smelled like 4th of July fireworks. She was helpless to stop the images from flooding her system, even as she watched Annette plow into the room, dive across the bed, and ram headfirst into Jacqueline. Chapter 68. Withville, Virginia, Wednesday, May 31st, 2023, 11:57 p.m. For a moment, her mind placed her behind the grandfather clock. Again, peering around the edge and watching Raymond take one step after another toward their parents' bedroom. "Stop," she tried to whisper. When her brother continued his trek down the hallway, she spoke louder. "Stop." Her brother continued on. "Raymond, stop!" Alex screamed the words, reaching deep into her core to make them as loud as possible. The effort snapped her mind into a different dimension of consciousness. Suddenly, Raymond was no longer wearing his pajamas or walking toward their parents' bedroom. Instead, he was dressed in his baseball uniform and standing at home plate, holding a bat high over his right shoulder, waiting for the next pitch. Alex was seated in a lawn chair watching the game like she'd done 1,000 times during her childhood. She had worked hard over the years to avoid memories like these. Picturing her little brother as a living, vibrant person brought too much pain and guilt for not doing more for him that night. For years, Alex had fought back the guilt of allowing Raymond to walk to their parents' bedroom that night, rather than running from her own bedroom to stop him. One of the tools she used to beat back the guilt was to avoid thinking of Raymond entirely. But now, somehow, she wanted to think of him. Needed to remember the animated 13-year-old she knew him as. The pitch came and Alex watched Raymond swing the bat. She heard the echoing clink ring out into the afternoon as he smashed the ball into left field. The ball shot between the outfielders and bounced all the way to the fence. Raymond raced around first base and headed to second. "Go, Raymond!" Alex cheered. Her brother cut around second and headed to third just as the center fielder picked up the ball and threw it to the cutoff man. Alex saw Raymond fly around third base and head for home. "Go, Raymond!" Alex yelled again as she jumped from her lawn chair and ran to the fence to get a better view. "Go!" The cutoff man fired the ball to the catcher, who was crouched over home plate. Alex watched as Raymond scrambled down the third base line and dove headfirst across home plate just as the ball arrived and the catcher swiped a tag. Then there was silence. The raucously cheering crowd, the umpire and players all went quiet. A plume of dust mushroomed around home plate from Raymond's headfirst slide, and Alex squinted her eyes to see the conclusion of the play, to see if Raymond was safe or out. But when the dust settled, there was no one there. Raymond had vanished, as had the crowd, and the baseball diamond, and the park. Alex opened her eyes and was back in the motel room. The burst of adrenaline from cheering for Raymond had brought her body into an upright sitting position. To her left, Annette and Jacqueline were against the wall, engaged in a fierce battle, both women flailing and struggling for a dominant position. Alex noticed that Annette's gun had landed near the bathroom door, and it appeared both of them were attempting to stop the other from retrieving it. Alex heard a piercing scream come from Jacqueline as the woman stumbled toward the bed, bringing Annette with her. Like a Greco-Roman wrestler, Jacqueline lifted Annette off the ground as she fell backward and rolled over the bed, so that when they hit the floor on the other side of the bed, Jacqueline was on top. The move was violent, and the crashing of their bodies shook the bed like an earthquake. Both women began struggling again. Alex saw that the battle was now focused on Jacqueline's right arm, and the syringe still gripped tightly in her hand. Alex watched as Jacqueline secured a dominant position straddling Annette. She wanted to help, but despite the adrenaline flooding her system, she was still fighting to move. A strange but clairvoyant thought entered her mind, and for a moment she believed again that she was dreaming, since the image of the page from her physics textbook, the one she had studied from the night her family was killed, came clearly into focus. Newton's first law played in a loop through her thoughts. An object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. From her sitting position, Alex threw herself backward, causing the mattress to propel her in the process. She twisted her body to the left when the momentum of the box spring sprang her off the bed. She landed on the floor and rolled toward the bathroom door. She made it far enough so that the gun was within reach. Her muscles were working again, if only in a jerky and uncontrolled fashion. She got to her hands and knees and crawled the rest of the way to the gun, gripped the handle in her palm, and fell to her side. She scooted to the wall, turned, and used her legs to bring herself into a sitting position. With her back pressed against the wall, Alex had a clear view over the top of the bed. She saw Jacqueline free her wrist from Annette's grasp and, in a blurry, swift motion, bring the needle down. The mattress blocked her view. Alex didn't see where the needle penetrated, only heard Annette scream and knew it had connected. Then, silence but for Jacqueline's heavy breathing. Alex lifted the gun and steadied. It felt like an anvil in her hands. She saw Jacqueline's hunched back first, then her head as Jacqueline sat up. Alex considered firing, but her arms were swaying too much for her to believe she'd be accurate. Jacqueline stood up, staring down at Annette, who was paralyzed at best and dead at worst. It took a moment before Jacqueline turned to see that the bed was empty. Another moment longer, before her gaze settled on Alex and the gun that was pointed at her chest. Alex took a calming breath, focused her mind like a laser, allowing the image of Raymond standing outside their parents' bedroom to fade from her thoughts long enough for her to concentrate. First, on her shoulders, then her arms, her hands, and finally her right index finger. Then, she squeezed the trigger. Part 7. Full circle. There's no way I can stay. Alex Armstrong. Chapter 69. Washington, D.C. Saturday, June 10th, 2023, 3:32 p.m. Jacqueline Jordan had been pronounced dead by EMTs when they arrived at room 109 of the Shady Side Motel. Alex and Annette were taken to the hospital and released the next morning after the succinylcholine colon had been flushed from their systems with copious amounts of saline delivered through an IV drip. They were no worse for wear, and Annette's only injury was a dislocated shoulder suffered when Jacqueline Jordan had crashed down on top of her during their violent struggle. Both Alex and Annette had been questioned by police. They each offered a similar story. They were working together. Alex on a case for Lancaster and Jordan, Annette on a vet for the federal government. When they learned that their respective cases overlapped, with the common denominator being Duncan Chadwick, they were chasing a lead that brought them to Wytheville. Annette went to Alex's motel room for a scheduled meeting, and all hell broke loose when she found Jacqueline Jordan standing over Alex's paralyzed body. The story had plenty of holes, but it held enough water to get them by. Annette standing at the FBI, and her direct ties to the White House prevented many follow-up questions that might have otherwise been asked. As promised, 1 week after their harrowing experience, Alex met Annette to turn over everything she had managed to discover about Laura McAllister's story. Her notes, her briefs, and a copy of Laura's episode. They met at the Perfect Cup and drank Americanos as they talked. "This hardly seems like a fair trade," Alex said. "I'm giving you information in exchange for you saving my life." "No," Annette said. "You're giving me information in exchange for information, just like we agreed to." Annette's right arm was secured by a sling that immobilized her injured shoulder. "And the whole saving my life thing?" Annette smiled. "I could argue that it was the other way around." Alex took a sip of coffee, reflecting on that night. "I guess we helped each other, but you instigated it." "That," Annette said, "I'll take credit for. I was pretty out of it when you showed up, but were you wearing high heels when you busted through the motel room door?" "Standard issue," Annette said with a laugh. "I knew the information Lane turned up was pretty devastating to you, so I planned to keep an eye on you, see if you needed anything. I ended up following you out of town, and that's when I saw Jacqueline Jordan follow you to the motel. I wasn't planning on getting into a gunfight." Alex shrugged as she turned over her research, pushing a large accordion file folder across the table. "I owe you more than this, so if there's ever a way I can repay you, let me know." Annette took the information. "I'd say we're even. If you ever decide to come back to DC, look me up. We'll have a coffee." "Will do." Annette reached over and took Alex's hand. "Thanks, Alex. You're going to be okay." Alex nodded. "I know. Oh. Hanao Shenniru. Oh. Wow." An hour later, Alex knocked on Garrett and Donna's door. As a united front and surrogate parents, they answered the door together. "Hi, sweetie," Donna said. Alex smiled. "Hi. Did it come back?" "It did," Donna said. "Come on in." Before she'd fallen asleep in the motel room 10 days earlier, Alex had devised a plan to obtain Jacqueline's fingerprints from the District of Columbia Bar Association and test them against the print found on her bedroom window the night her family was killed. After her night at the Shady Side Motel, the fingerprint confirmation was a formality, but would provide full closure on an event that had defined her life. After searching so long for the truth, Alex needed to be sure. Although police were still attempting to piece together a motive for why a prominent attorney had attempted to kill one of her investigators, no answers had yet been found, and Alex wasn't offering any clues. There were two reasons Alex had decided to keep the details about Jacqueline Jordan's role in her family's death to herself. The first was selfish. The last thing Alex wanted was to resurrect the story of her family's murder and put it back in the headlines. Telling the authorities what she knew about Jacqueline Jordan would do exactly that. Alex had narrowly escaped the media scrutiny a decade ago. She was sure she would not survive the tabloids and true crime nuts a second time. The other reason was selfless, and it had to do with her love for Garrett and Donna Lancaster. Revealing the sensational details that Jacqueline Jordan, the attorney who played a crucial role in getting the original charges against Alex dismissed, and who helped win Alexandra Quinlan's defamation case against the state of Virginia, was, in fact, the one who had mowed down the Quinlan family, was a story so powerful that it would undoubtedly sink Lancaster and Jordan, ruin Garrett's career, and send him and Donna into exile. Alex had spent too many years there to deliver the same sentence to the people she loved most on the planet. Instead, her closure would come privately. Donna still had contacts inside the McIntosh Police Department, and Alex had asked her to tap those resources and obtain the lone print from her bedroom window that was stored in evidence. Alex had asked Annette Packard for a final favor, and Annette worked with Donna to have the print analyzed against Jacqueline's. It had taken a week, but now, as they all sat in the kitchen nook, Donna now pushed a single piece of paper across the table so that it was in front of Alex. She stared at Donna for a moment, building up courage until she finally looked down at the page. Jacqueline Jordan's print was a match to the one lifted from Alex's bedroom window. Alex inhaled sharply, even though she was all but certain what she'd find. Still, finally arriving at the truth after so many years took her breath away. Tears welled in her eyes, and Garrett was immediately next to her. He put his arm around her as Alex turned her head into his chest. "I'm so sorry," Garrett whispered. Donna reached over and took Alex's hand, completing the unlikely family they had become. "We need to decide," Donna said, "what we're going to do with this information." "Nothing," Alex said, lifting her head from Garrett's chest. "We're not going to do anything with it." "But, Alex," Donna started. "No," Alex said, cutting her off. "This should be my decision. You need to allow me to make it. I can't go through it all again. I can't go through my family's image on every grocery store tabloid. I can't go through the press hovering outside my door. Plus, this time you'd both have it as bad as me. We don't care about what this would do to us or my firm," Garrett said. "But I do, and this is what I want. I want this to stay among the three of us. I don't want anyone else to know." "What about Annette Packard and the FBI?" Garrett asked. Alex shook her head. "Annette was doing me a favor. She worked with an ex-FBI profiler who was a friend of hers. She didn't go through any formal channels, and she won't say a word." Garrett and Donna looked at each other, and Alex saw the silent confirmation between them. "You're sure?" Donna asked. "I'm sure." Garrett pulled her close one more time. "Any chance we can stop you from leaving?" Alex placed her head against his chest again and closed her eyes. "There's no way I can stay." Chapter 70. McIntosh, Virginia, Monday, June 12, 2023, 10:04 a.m. She pulled up to her old house on Montgomery Lane and parked in the driveway. The in-ground sprinklers were running and the lawn was a gorgeous shade of green, freshly mowed the day before, with the edges trimmed and corners at sharp 90-degree angles. The hedges were pruned, and the azaleas sparkled with morning sunlight and dripped as they bathed in the sprinkler's mist. Alex climbed from her car and looked around the neighborhood. It was her first time back in McIntosh in some time. The house had been on a good run with no hiccups in the last 2 years that required her presence. A few minor things had come up, but were easily handled by the maintenance crew Alex had hired to look after the property. The hot water heater had needed a new pilot light. A woodpecker had drilled a hole in the cedar siding, and a slab of concrete on the walkway to the front door had sunk and needed to be raised. A wave of nostalgia crashed over her as she looked at her childhood home. The good memories from the first 18 years of her life had, over time, outshined the darkness of a single night when the home had turned into something else. Despite the time it took to happen, her mind had managed to juggle things back into the proper order. She could once again look at the house and bask in all the joyous memories it held. Alex wasn't sure how the transformation had taken place. It was likely the result of some combination of therapy, time, and the closure she had finally found. However it came to be, she was happy to finally stand in front of her childhood home without fear. For years, she had meticulously kept it maintained and cared for. But now, she was ready to let it go. Not, however, before she took care of one last thing. She keyed the front door and stepped into her past. She remembered back to the hot summer night when she snuck into the home just before leaving for Cambridge. It was the night she came to retrieve Raymond's baseball card collection, but found the bank statements instead that started her down a years-long journey. She remembered the dank odor the home held that night, the sticky summer air having penetrated the walls to fill the home with a bitter smell of vacancy and neglect. Today, on this bright, sunny morning, the home was immaculate and airy, carrying the scent of lemon wax from hardwood floors that shined with sunlight. She walked through the first floor and took in the empty rooms. The freshly painted walls were bright and welcoming, the newly finished floors smooth and glossy. The kitchen was straight out of an AGTV series, with quartz countertops, a butler's pantry, and a decorative hood over the oven. The contractor had done a great job, and the home would make some family very happy. Finished with her inspection of the first floor, Alex walked back into the foyer and started up the stairs. She did so without hesitation or fear. Enough time had passed now, and those memories, although never eradicated, could be well controlled and kept at bay. At the top of the stairs, she turned and walked down the hallway to her old bedroom. Empty now, and with hardwood in lieu of carpet, the room looked smaller than she remembered. She had the same sensation when she walked into Raymond's room. Finally, she emerged into the hallway and walked to the edge of her parents' bedroom. The door was open, and she walked inside. Here, too, the walls were freshly painted, and the carpet was replaced with immaculate hardwood to match the rest of the home. Alex smiled. The house was perfect. There was a knock on the front door, and Alex headed down the stairs. "Hi, Alex," the woman said when Alex opened the door. "Nice. Tammy Worth." "Hi, Tammy," Alex said to the realtor. "Come on in." Tammy looked around the home and smiled. The outside is gorgeous and so well maintained, and the interior is just as immaculate. I don't think the house will be difficult to sell. "Really?" Alex asked. "Not in today's market and in this sort of condition. It's move-in ready. I'll just take some photos and measurements for the website." "Sounds good," Alex said. "Do your thing and let me know if you need anything else." Tammy smiled and got to work. A few minutes later, Alex saw the moving van back into the driveway and two strapping young men emerge. She opened the front door and waved them in. "Hi," one of the guys said. "We're here from On The Go Movers." The guy looked around. "Not much to move, I see." "Just one item," Alex said. "It's upstairs." Alex led the two movers upstairs and pointed to the end of the hallway where the grandfather clock stood. "That's it?" the guy asked. "That's it. And it's going to our packaging and shipping facility?" "Yes," Alex said. "I provided them with the address where it's to be shipped." The two men removed straps that were wrapped around their shoulders before they approached the grandfather clock. A few minutes later, Alex smiled as she watched the men load the clock into the back of the truck. She imagined what it would look like in her new flat in London. She'd seen photos of the place online and had already decided where the clock would go. "Just need your signature," one of the guys said after he closed the back of the truck. Alex scribbled on the page and handed the clipboard back. The men climbed into the cab, and Alex watched the moving truck pull away. "All set," the realtor said, walking out the front door with her camera strapped around her neck. "I'll have my crew stake the fort. Sale sign in the front lawn later today, and I'll formally list the house on our website tonight. I'll let you know if we get any interest." "Thanks," Alex said. "I'm betting we have an offer before the end of the week, but I'll keep you posted." Alex stood in the driveway as the realtor pulled away. She took in the normal sounds of the neighborhood. Birds chirping and a lawnmower buzzing from a few houses away as she sat on the front porch and waited. 15 minutes later, a car pulled into the driveway. Alex stood up and watched the car closely. Eventually, Tracy Carr, the reporter who had been the first on the scene the fateful night her family was killed, climbed out of the car and stared at her from the driveway. "Funny meeting you here," Alex said in an attempt to break the ice. "You knew I recognized you that day at my shoot," Tracy said as she closed the door and walked up the front path to where Alex stood. "I did. You look a lot different," Tracy said, "but your eyes gave you away." "I figured," Alex said. The two women stared at each other for a moment. "You called me. Now what?" Alex retrieved her lipstick from her pocket, a sharp orange hue, and coated her lips before she smiled. "Now I make you an offer." Chapter 71. London, England, Saturday, July 1st, 2023, 1:05 p.m. 2 weeks after the for sale sign was staked in the front yard of her childhood home, Alex arrived in London. Years earlier she had come as Alexandra Quinlan, on the run and in hiding. This time, she came as Alex Armstrong, running from nothing and hiding from no one, determined to make the fresh start she had failed at the first time. When she analyzed her life, she determined that there was nowhere else she could go. Remaining in DC and continuing her work at Lancaster and Jordan felt neither feasible nor appropriate. She had over the years developed a unique set of investigative skills, and she knew London was the best place to put them to use. Donna and Garrett understood but made her promise to keep in touch. Alex had agreed, but the unwritten contract was not necessary. Garrett and Donna Lancaster had been woven into the fabric of her life, and Alex could no more exist without them as she could without air. Her London flat was of a modest size and price. Alex had no reason to purchase something larger, even though she could afford to do so. She wanted to make as small a splash as possible when she landed in her new town and started her new job. When the doorbell rang on Saturday afternoon, Alex smiled. She had trouble controlling her excitement and couldn't quite explain why she was so happy to finally see the man who rang her bell. Perhaps it was because he had made the new chapter in her life possible, and despite that she'd spent less than a week with him, for some reason he'd taken up a meaningful place in her heart over the years. Not romantically. He was twice her age, and not as a father figure. Garrett Lancaster would always hold that spot in her life. But the man who rang her doorbell occupied some special place in her life Alex could not define. She walked to the door and opened it. "Leo the Brit," Alex said with a smile. "Alex the Gunslinger," Leo said it in his thick British accent, holding up his hands as if under arrest. "You're not gonna fill me with holes, are you?" Alex smiled. "You're never going to let me live that down, are you? Unlikely, mate. Come on in." The last time Alex had seen Leo was when she'd kissed him lightly on the cheek years ago, after he'd saved her from Laverne Parker and Drew Estes. It was then that Alex had learned that Garrett Lancaster had hired Leo to look after her. Despite the years that had passed since they'd last seen each other, Alex considered Leo a friend. 8 years of texting and FaceTiming had allowed them to form a close bond. Leo was an enigmatic but endearing presence in her life. Back when Leo was hired to look after Alex, he was starting his private investigative practice in London. For all intents and purposes, Alex had been his first case and Garrett Lancaster his first client. Leo had spent a year and a half following Alex around Europe and keeping tabs on her. When the gravy train ran out and Alex hopped on a plane back to the States, Leo was forced to look for other paying clients. He found them and now ran a successful PI firm. When Alex texted him to let him know her investigative skills were for sale, Leo jumped at the opportunity. Things were getting busy, and he needed some help. To date, he hadn't been able to find a competent partner. Alex promised she was the answer. So you probably want to know how much I'm gonna pay you, and what I'm gonna ask you to do. No, Alex said. We can discuss all that later. I'm sure you'll pay me fairly, and I'm more than confident that I'll exceed your expectations with anything you ask me to investigate. Leo squinted his eyes. If you didn't ask me over to talk about the job, then what am I doing here on a Saturday? I was going to butter you up with a beer first, but let's leave the beer for when we're done. Done with what? Come on, Alex said, heading toward the door. I need a hand with something. A delivery truck was parked on the street outside her flat. A man sat on the back fender with the sliding door open. Are you going to be able to handle this? The truck driver asked Alex as he gave her a clipboard. I am now. Alex signed for the delivery and handed the clipboard back to the driver. Leo, the Brit, looked into the back of the truck, where a tall item was bubble wrapped and waiting. I need you to help me carry this upstairs, Alex said. What is it? Leo asked. And how much does it weigh? A grandfather clock. And a lot. Leo looked from the formidable obstacle waiting in the truck to Alex. I'm deducting the cost of my services from your first paycheck. Alex smiled. Sounds fair and reasonable. Right. Later that night, Alex sat in her new flat. It was late, the television was off, and the only sound came from the grandfather clock standing in the corner of the room. Alex had wound the clock to bring its weights as high as they could go. Now she listened to the clock tick as the pendulum swung. For most of her childhood, the clock had been an unnoticed thing in the second-floor hallway outside her bedroom. Alex had passed by it 1,000 times, paying no mind to its beauty. Then it became something else the night her family was killed. Something grand and protective. With nothing but the ticking clock keeping her company, Alex reached for the day's copy of the New York Times. Tracy Carr had finished her article about Laura McAllister and the story of rape at McCormack University that the girl was about to break before she was killed. It included the names of those who were incriminated in her episode. The article thoroughly covered Duncan Chadwick's role in obtaining the date rape drug used to spike drinks at his fraternity. An investigation was sure to follow, and even before the article was published, Larry Chadwick had voluntarily removed himself from the running of nominees to fill the Supreme Court vacancy. The story was explosive, and Tracy did a great job honoring Laura McAllister in the article. Alex sat back after she finished reading. There were sure to be hangers-on. There were sure to be true crime fanatics who would never stop looking for Alexander Quinlan. But without a prominent reporter leading the way, those fanatics would soon burn out. Alex's offer to Tracy Carr had involved tipping the reporter off to a potential blockbuster story involving Larry Chadwick's son and Laura McAllister. In exchange for the information Alex would hand over, Tracy Carr had agreed to stop her pursuit of Alexander Quinlan. No more yearly updates. No more lurid videos. No more travel to Macintosh to shoot footage in front of her family's home. She put the newspaper to the side. It had been an arduous journey, but she had finally arrived at that fork in the road of life that marked her fresh start. She leaned back into the cushion of the couch, closed her eyes, and listened to the swinging pendulum of the grandfather clock as it clicked, back and forth, back and forth. Chapter 72. The Appalachian Mountains, Saturday, October 14th, 2023, 9:52 p.m. He drove the SUV through the winding roads of the Appalachian Mountains. Although far from city surveillance cameras, he avoided gas stations and rest areas where his image might be recorded, and had taken the precaution of swapping out his plates for ones lifted from a Maryland junkyard. As he drove, the rock face climbed vertically next to the guardrails, boxing him in as the road sliced through a canyon with mountains on either side. Other parts of the drive were wide open with nothing but undulating mountains in the distance. When he saw smoke spiraling from the chimneys of tucked-away homes, he knew he was getting close. Had Larry Chadwick been appointed to the Supreme Court, the night's mission would have been exponentially more difficult. The 9 Supreme Court justices were closely shielded by government agencies. Inside the confines of the District of Columbia, the Supreme Court police protected the justices day and night. Outside of D.C., the U.S. Marshals Service provided security detail. Thankfully, Judge Chadwick had been passed over for the Supreme Court. Technically, he stepped down and voluntarily removed himself from consideration. Either way, as a federal judge and not a Supreme Court justice, security detail for Larry Chadwick came only by request, not by commission. On test runs to the judge's vacation home, he'd seen no such detail. Tucked away in the foothills of the Appalachians, the judge likely felt isolated and safe. The town of Heathrow was small and quiet. It consisted of a single road with 2 stoplights and mom-and-pop shops and restaurants lining each side of the street. Residents were cordial and made up of wealthy East Coasters who cherished their privacy. He made the final turn and accelerated down the road that ran behind the judge's vacation home. The judge's usual schedule involved Chadwick and his wife leaving D.C. in the mid-afternoon on a Friday and returning to the city Sunday evening, in time for dinner and a glass of wine before the judge read briefs in preparation for his Monday morning docket. It was one of America's great ironies, he thought now as he slowed his vehicle, that the man who had hired Reese Rankin to rape and kill Laura McAllister had been given the power to preside over the justice of a nation. Jacqueline could have gone to the police with what she'd learned from her visit with Reese Rankin. She could have told the authorities about Rankin's confession and that he had raped and killed Laura McAllister after being hired by Larry and Duncan Chadwick, but to do so would have placed the Chadwicks in the protective hands of the American justice system, where it was unlikely a proper sentence would have been handed down. Chadwick and his son deserved more than America's system of justice could provide. He pulled to the side of the road and turned into a wooded area. He edged his car far enough into the foliage so that it was out of sight from passing vehicles, then got out and trudged through the forest for 3/4 of a mile until the narrow path ended at the back of Larry Chadwick's vacation home. He was early. Lights still brightened the home's windows, and he settled down in a clearing to wait for the Chadwicks to retire for the night. He removed the Smith & Wesson from his waistband and placed it on the ground next to him. He took a moment to listen to the calmness of the wilderness around the property. The closest neighbor was more than a mile away. A loon cooed from a far-off location on the lake. The sound reminded him of his youth, when he spent his summers away at camp. The clearing in which he sat brought him back to the night they had killed Jerry Lawland. It was at Camp Montague that his life's journey had begun. It was at Camp Montague that he had first taken matters into his own hands. It was there, after enduring a summer of abuse, and then witnessing that same abuse befall Jacqueline, that he had decided some people were not worthy of the soft justice America delivered. A comfortable existence in prison where predators enjoyed 3 daily meals, and the joys of entertainment, that the joys of entertainment included books and television and more. No, some perpetrators were deserving of more than a pampered life behind bars. Those who committed the most heinous acts of violence, sexual assault on children, and those who assist them deserved a justice this country could not provide. As he sat in the clearing at the edge of the Chadwick's property, he remembered Jerry Lawland. He remembered staring at the man's body as paramedics wheeled him out of the cabin, a white sheet covering him from head to toe, confirming how well their plan had worked. Jerry Lawland had been their first kill. Jerry Lawland had been the first time he and Jacqueline had teamed up to stop a predator. Others followed through the years, but he still remembered Jerry Lawland most vividly. He remembered them all to varying degrees because he learned something new from each of them. Most had gone as planned and had been perfectly executed. One, however, still haunted him. One had produced collateral damage that had, in the end, been their downfall. Now, he would have to continue their work alone. As he sat in the woods behind Larry Chadwick's home and waited for the house lights to dim, he remembered that night. McIntosh, Virginia, January 15th, 2013. The town of McIntosh was small and tight-knit. Killing Dennis and Helen Quinlan would have consequences, but he had been unable to talk Jacqueline out of it. There was irony there, that he had started their vigilante duo decades earlier at Camp Montague, but that Jacqueline had been the catalyst that kept it going all these years. That night's mission was something she would not be denied, despite his protests about the potential pitfalls. He pulled the car into the industrial lot that butted up against the quiet neighborhood where Dennis and Helen Quinlan lived. In addition to being clients, the Quinlans were, after great scrutiny of their tax records and financial documents, the accountants who had helped Roland Glazer perpetrate his sex trafficking ring. The Quinlans were the financial wizards who had helped Glazer hide his money. They were the ones who had issued the checks and initiated the money transfers that allowed Glazer the freedom to travel to his secluded island, where young women were delivered on a weekly basis. Others were involved. Politicians and businessmen and royalty, but none of those players were touchable. The Quinlans, however, were accessible and had had their fingerprints on Glazer's dirty dealings for years. The excuse they offered when they approached Lancaster and Jordan, that they didn't know where Glazer's money originated from, or where it went after they finished protecting it, was fragile at best. An outright lie, more likely. The explanation may have been true at first, perhaps, but it was unfathomable that their ignorance persisted longer than a fleeting moment. Their guilt was evidenced by the fact that after Roland Glazer came under federal indictment, the Quinlans ran to Lancaster and Jordan for protection against prosecution. He turned off the headlights and drifted to a stop as the wheels crunched over gravel. "In and out," he said to Jacqueline. A quick nod of her head was all he got in return. Then, she opened the door and disappeared into the forest. With the headlights off, he kept the engine running. They had clocked the mission 3 different times, and had a top and bottom for how long it should take her to trek through the woods, sneak across the back lawn, retrieve Dennis Quinlan's shotgun from the garage, enter through the back door, climb through the back door, the stairs, take care of Dennis and Helen Quinlan, exit the home, race back through the woods, and make their escape. He watched the clock as he waited. The bottom time limit came and went. He began sweating when the upper limit approached and grew restless when it passed. Something had gone wrong, and he thought for a fleeting moment about heading into the woods to see what had happened. But that was a poor decision that would put both of them at risk. The other option was worse: abort the mission and leave without her. He could do neither, so he waited. And waited longer, until, finally, he saw a figure in the woods. Jacqueline was running in a frantic way he had never seen before. Something had gone wrong. He shifted the car into reverse, and as soon as she clambered into the passenger seat, he hit the gas pedal and spun gravel as he swung the car into a wild backward U-turn. After shifting into drive, he ripped out of the industrial park. Once on the main road and with some distance between them and the Quinlans' home, he turned on the headlights and reduced his speed to the legal limit. He looked over at her and saw that she placed her gloved hands over her face. The index finger on her right hand protruded through the glove where the latex had split. "Your glove is broken," he said. She took her palms from her face and inspected her right hand. "You might have left a print behind," he said. She shook her head and closed her eyes. That's only the beginning of our problems. He pulled to the curb outside her house, and they listened to the scanner for a few minutes as reports of shots fired came through. During the ride, she had offered him a summary of the events that took place inside the Quinlan home, transfixed the whole time she spoke on her right hand and her bare index finger. Did you touch anything? He asked. He watched as Jacqueline did a run-through in her mind. The window, she said. I opened the window in the kid's bedroom to look outside. And the front door handle. But that might have been with my other hand. He watched as she continued to stare at the bare finger that stood out from the others. What should we do? She asked. We can't do anything at the moment. Go inside. Try to sleep. I want to get off the road. There was silence as she sat unmoving in the passenger seat. Did the girl see you? He asked. I don't know. I don't think so. The bedroom window was open and she was gone. She paused before looking at him. The boy, he saw me. I had no choice. He nodded. I know. Go inside. We'll talk tomorrow. Burn the clothes. Boots, gloves, everything. Do it tonight. Without responding, she opened the door and climbed out of the car. She said nothing more as she walked to her front door and disappeared inside. He put the car in gear and drove home. When his garage door opened, he pulled inside and sat in the dark for a few minutes, running through the night and wanting to ask what, exactly, had transpired inside the Quinlan home. Jacqueline was too shaken to tell him all of it, only that she had, after killing Dennis and Helen Quinlan, also killed their 13-year-old son when the boy opened the Quinlan's bedroom door and startled her. She hadn't shared details about how it had transpired. She was too shaken to get more out of her, other than that the daughter had escaped and was now an unknown. After a few minutes in the dark, he stepped out of the car and entered his home. He kept the lights out and climbed into bed. He tossed and turned for an hour, unable to sleep. In all their years, nothing like this had happened before. They were careful and meticulous. Only the guilty were punished, never the innocent. He and Jacqueline were the ones fighting for the innocent. They were the ones exacting justice on the truly vile members of society. Justice the American system could not properly provide. They had always been protectors of the innocent, until tonight. It was 3:10 a.m. when he checked the bedside clock. Finally, after much consternation, his eyelids sagged and he drifted off to sleep. 25 minutes later, the phone rang and jarred him from a shallow, restless slumber. When he lifted his cell phone to check the ID, a sinking feeling came to his stomach. "Hello," he said in a groggy voice. "Garrett," Donna said in an urgent whisper. "It's me. I need you down at the precinct. I know it's late, but I need you right away." Garrett Lancaster asked no questions. His willingness to rush to police headquarters and help his wife in the middle of the night would come off as heroic. The act of a devoted husband eager to do anything to help his wife. In reality, his lack of curiosity about why his wife was summoning him to police headquarters came from knowing that a triple homicide had occurred in their small town. That his life was about to collide with that of Alexandra Quinlan's was impossible to predict, and that some part of his heart would forever bleed for the girl would only be realized later. He climbed from bed, thought briefly about taking a shower and changing into a suit and tie, but opted instead to simply slip on jeans, pull a Washington Wizards ball cap over his unkempt hair, and head out the door.